Welcome to Your Texas Land, a place where we take a deep dive into all things related to land in Texas. I'm your host, Brad Glover, Business Development Director here at Braun Gresham. And in this episode, we have our real estate attorney, Eric Gomez, who is going to be walking us through why you need a real estate attorney, what is a real estate attorney, and why you should hire one because it's going to benefit you to do so. So, Eric, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. I'm passionate about this topic, and I love to share about my interests and how I might be able to help.
Well, we're looking forward to it. So let's just kick it off with why do we need a real estate attorney? Why does someone need a real estate attorney?
Sure. From a 30,000 foot perspective, a good real estate attorney has the ability to possibly make you money or to save you money or to give you peace of mind by protecting something that's near and dear to you and you're putting a lot into.
Okay, well, that's three good reasons. Let's explore those a little bit more. So, make me money. So, what does that look like? How is a real estate attorney going to make me money?
So, I want to expand a little bit and say, not all real estate attorneys are the same. That's a really broad swath of a practice area that you might not realize. Some real estate attorneys do title work, right? Others review contracts for single family homes. Others, like myself, do land use and development projects, regulatory work, also buying and selling land transactions. So just because you find a real estate attorney online doesn't mean you're going to have the right key to unlock the lock that you're needing.
Okay, so you need the real estate attorney that's going to fit what your real estate purpose is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right. So far, so good.
Right. So circling back to your question, how can I possibly make you money? Well, as I stated on, being a land use and development attorney, there's a lot that goes into land. It goes without saying. It's not just a single family house where there's a promulgated form and you negotiate the sales price and maybe replacing the roof, right, or painting the walls. There are floodplain issues. There are boundary issues, survey issues. There are plans that can often be bigger than your land that you may not realize are going on in the background. Government plans, road plans, park plans, eminent domain. There are all kinds of factors weighing in on your piece of property.
So these are all things that are potentially going to impact land that I'm buying versus going into a subdivision and buying a residential home.
Land that you're buying or land that you're selling.
Okay. All right. Fair. Okay, Eric. So let's say I have some rural land and for any number of a variety of reasons, I'm ready to sell it.
Sure. How
are you going to save me money if I hire you as my real estate attorney?
That's a great question. So one way is usually for selling your land, there's a catalyst. And the catalyst is either, hey, this land is held by a bunch of our family members and we are ready to do something next. Another could be, hey, we're getting these letters in the mail from, prospective buyers. How do we know whether or not they're legit? And how do we know if these letters if the offer being made is a fair one? Those are questions you really need to understand. A lot of times, prospective purchasers of your property are mass mailing people. And the letters may not be very personal. And if they're not very personal, give them about as much seriousness as they gave you to purchase your property.
All right.
So, that's one aspect. If you get a personal letter that looks like it's coming from somebody and is offering you a price, the way that we can impact that is by understanding what's going on with your property. Why are they coming after your property? Why do they want to buy it from you?
So that gets into something that you and I have talked about before, which is this idea of highest and best use, right? So if I've got some land and I just think it's beautiful, ranch land, but I'm ready to do something different or I'm ready to sell it for whatever reason, you may have a different perspective on highest and best use than I do as the seller. True?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. A highest and best use, it's really hard to just look at the present day and figure out what your highest and best use is. That is an analysis that takes a short, mid, and long-term perspective. What's the labor market looking like? Who are the employers coming to the area? What kind of major thoroughfares are being created? Are there schools going in close to you? Is there another residential subdivision going on next to your land? All of this stuff. Where are your utility lines? Are there plans to increase the utilities to your property? The availability of water, power, sewer is a major driver to the potential of your property.
So wait, explain that a little bit more. What do you mean? We're talking highest and best use, and we didn't really define that.
Sure.
It's a little bit self-evident, but maybe we back up and say, like, what is highest and best use the way that we're using it right now?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I appreciate the step back. Highest and best use ultimately is about, number one, is about your goals. Maybe the market says they want a particular product, but your family's not okay with that. That's really, really, really important. What are your family's values? What are their connections to the land? What do you want to see and not see? What are your goals? Is it to protect your property and conserve it? Is it to create possibly generational wealth? And how do we best accomplish that? That is the number one driver for what is ultimately the highest and best use for your property.
So you're looking at it from not just what is the highest value monetarily.
Right.
You're taking a more holistic approach to highest and best use.
That's the perfect word for it. It has to be a holistic approach. We're a good real estate attorney should shepherd you through a difficult and complicated process. And that's our goal. So that starts with you. What do you care about? What is your connection? And then let's match that to what the market's looking for. And see if we can build a bridge.
So that would be, let's say I have 200 acres and I want to sell a portion of it, and I'm okay if they put houses there, but I don't want them to put a Walmart on there or some other big box on there. Then that's something that I would have some control over potentially?
Not potentially, absolutely. You would absolutely have control over that. And we've been in those scenarios before with families who have said, look, we are okay doing a master plan community. We get to partner and possibly name streets and create community spaces. What we don't want is a giant parking lot on this property. This is the creek down there is where we used to play, with our grandparents or whatever. And we just don't want to see that. And that's perfectly fine. In fact, in my experience, most partners who are going to come and develop want to know those things. It helps to guide the development process and keeps problems from arising down the road.
Okay, I like that. That's great. Okay, Eric, so let's close the loop on making me money. We've talked about I've got land I've got to sell. You've helped me sort out that there's potentially some bad apples that are just sending me offers to buy my land. We've talked about highest and best use, which is really a personal thing. Now that we've established this relationship, you understand what I want to do with the part of my land that I want to sell. How are you going to make me money?
So once we figure out the foundation, the next step is to close the deal. And closing the deal looks like finding, so you've got your offer, and I can tell you a lot of times if you're dealing with a solicited letter, even if it's personalized, the offer is typically 1% over the market value. I mean, that's really what it is. And sometimes that 1% is off the appraisal district, which is considerably low. And a lot of potential buyers know this because, or they realize what they're doing because a lot of families haven't done an appraisal. They're not really sure what the value of their land is. They're not professional land brokers. So they get a letter in the mail. It's promising a lot of money, and they get excited about it. But what the next steps would be would be to get a commercial appraisal or some kind of appraisal from a reputable company who works in this area, right? And it can pull good information. A typical appraisal should cost $5,000 5,000 on the low end, about 7,000, 7,500 on the high end. And you might say, man, that sounds like a lot of money, but keep in mind the dividends on the return. I mean, here's a great example. We have a client who was selling a relatively large property. The offer came in at $12.5 million, and we took all those factors, highest and best use. We got an appraisal from a reputable company and leveraged our knowledge of the land to increase the offer to $15.5 million. That is a $3 million increase on, let's just call it a $10,000 or less investment. I would say it's a pretty good return.
Pretty good return on my investment.
Pretty good return. And these negotiations were with savvy land dealers. So it's not like we took advantage of them. It's just there's power in understanding what you've got in your hands, and we're here to help you figure that out.
And land prices have risen dramatically in the last couple of years. If you haven't paid attention to your land values lately, you may be surprised at what the actual market value is.
The land is it's really interesting. It's like I don't want to say it's like the stock market because that's not a good barometer you want to be looking at right now. But it does fluctuate. The land prices go up, land prices go down. But in general, if you own a piece of property in the state of Texas, you've got a pretty good asset.
All right. Well, thank you. All right, let's shift gears. So we talked a little bit about how a real estate attorney can help you make money. How is a real estate attorney going to save me some money? So if we think about it, I've got land that I want to purchase. How can you help me?
Yes. So the way we can help save you money is really about perspective. And there aren't too many, even within the real estate arena, legal arena, there aren't too many potential partners that have as broad of a perspective as we have. And what I mean by that is, I've been an assistant district attorney. I've worked for the government, the local government, and the planning departments. I've represented developers on that side of the deal where we're making the offers and developing projects. I've represented families on the other side of the table. I've also represented local governments and redrafted development codes and subdivision and plating codes. So all of that combines into this map and toolkit where we can see down the road almost every bump and obstacle that's coming on the regulatory side, on the buyer side, on the seller side, and possible litigation when we're drafting a contract. Contract drafting, contract review is about risk shifting, and we don't want you to end up in a lawsuit. And because, a lot of us here at Braun Gresham have litigated land deals, we can draft contracts in such a way to avoid many of those pitfalls.
You were telling me a story about a couple that was building a home, and you helped them with their initial contract with the builder. I thought that was pretty interesting, and I think that would definitely fall under save you some money and potentially really be an asset. Why don't you walk us through that real quick? Sure.
So there are a lot of folks, particularly in Central Texas, contract with custom home builders. It's a popular thing to do. You find your lot and you reach out to a home builder. Well, there are some forms floating around that are very, very, very common, and I don't have too high of an opinion of some of these forms.
Yeah, these are the forms for the contract between the builder and the purchaser, correct?
It's very uncommon for the homeowner, prospective home buyer, to have a form ready to go and say, here's our contract, Mr. Builder. I just need you to fill in the blanks. In fact, I've never seen that happen before. Usually it's the other way around, with the builder saying,
here's my contract.
Yeah. And oftentimes there are warranty issues. Like, man, the warranty isn't going to cover a lot of stuff. There are issues with possible liens and the workers that can be put the workers that are subcontractors that are coming that can put liens on the property. There are milestone events built into the contract where you pay based on accomplishing certain milestones.
Sure, you're going to pay a draw once you hit a milestone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pay a draw when you hit a milestone. So, and another thing too is to vet the home builder. I mean, I've represented clients here locally who thought they were getting into their dream home, and the home builder ran off with all the money, and it was extremely bad for some of these folks. Some of them ended in family tragedies because of the impact. And so the ability to vet a custom home builder is also really, really important, and to be able to hold them accountable with a well-drafted home construction contract.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm thinking about all this you've talked about, and this might be a good time to kind of ask this question. So most people are familiar with the real estate agent. A lot of people use a real estate agent. I would say most people use a real estate agent when they buy a house, when they buy property. What are the biggest differences between you as a real estate attorney and a real estate agent? Sure,
that's a great question, and I don't think a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people really understand that. In fact, one of the common questions I get is, "Why do I need you? I've got an agent or a realtor." And really, what a real estate agent and a realtor will do for you is, they have access to the MLS, and they are great at bringing parties together, at bringing buyers and sellers to the table. That's through marketing efforts. That's through scouring listings.
Sure, and the referral network, right? Their pocket listings.
Right. They are bringing parties to the table, and they're also trying to understand the values of their clients in terms of, this is what we're looking to buy, or when we're selling, this is our bottom line. This is how we like they are really trying to identify what their values are and to match a buyer or seller in the market with them. Sort of like a recon, and kind of relationships and service. For a real estate attorney, we're not going to get out there and scour the MLS. We are not going to get out there and use our network to bring parties together. Sometimes, it depends on the transaction. I can do that on rural land sales, but like on buying and selling a home, that's not really my forte. My forte is, once those parties are together, how do we ensure that the transaction goes smoothly and that all of the risk is accounted for, so that the parties can walk away from the transaction in a win-win situation with peace of mind. That's what I'm there for.
I love that. That's great. So it's certainly not a replacement. It sounds it's a very complementary relationship between a realtor and a real estate attorney in terms of working together on something. And we've talked a little bit about this previously, Eric, but rural land is especially important to have a real estate attorney, which is a little bit different than buying a home in a well-established subdivision. Can you touch on that a little bit for us?
Sure, absolutely. Rural land is very, very different than a residential home, even if the rural land has a home on it. A lot of times, residential homes are, there's a promulgated form, and a lot of this stuff's filled out. It's either a TREC form or a TR form, and there's not a whole lot of controversy for the most part. There's a home inspection. Like I said, painting the walls, replacing carpet, stuff like that.
Sure, there's a title search, right? Title work.
Yeah, title commitment, reviewing title commitments, making sure all the closing documents are drafted. Rural land is different. Rural land, it's really about the purpose and the plans of the buyers and sellers. Why are you selling? Why are you buying? What are your goals and values? Do you understand this land's water availability? Do you understand its drainage issues? Do you understand how old the septic is on the land, or is there a septic system, or what are you going to do about that? Are you planning to build? Whose jurisdiction are you in? There's all kinds of issues that come to bear with rural land that aren't present on a single family home for the most part. And often single family homes are in cities. So you have a lot of zoning regulations and ordinances to fall back on. Maybe there are restrictive covenants, HOAs and POAs that really help to create a sort of a safe box when you're buying. But with rural land, a lot of that stuff's not present. So it's really up to what is there a plat? What do the plat notes say? What does the title chain look like?
So, well, two things. It sounds like there's much more buyer beware with rural land, but let's define rural land. I think everyone feels pretty comfortable with a home in a well-established subdivision. Don't have to explain that. But when you start using the term rural land, at what point do you consider land rural?
Well, for the most part, I would say if it's outside of a municipal jurisdiction. Now, it's a bit nuanced.
That's a guideline, right?
General guideline because rural land can be in the extraterritorial jurisdiction of a municipality and still be considered rural. But the ETJ of a city, there's a lot less restrictions. There's no zoning, so that has a lot to do with it. But rural land, for the most part, is outside of a city's full purpose jurisdiction, and often relies on county regulations or state regulations to sort of provide a regulatory framework.
Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about this, and we just use this term, so let's make sure we define it. ETJ. I want to give our listeners a quick definition on ETJ.
Yeah, ETJs. So ETJs this is my opinion. I've been doing it a while, so take it for what it's worth. But ETJs were established a long time ago to protect municipalities, and they're sort of this buffer area around a city. Can often be 5 mile buffer around a city. Although there's smaller buffers, but what they would do is they would enable a city to regulate that buffer in order to protect the residents of their city. And another thing that ETJs enabled is they enabled cities to annex involuntarily from that ETJ. Well, a lot's changed since ETJs were first formulated, and cities can no longer annex involuntarily, and so the regulatory roles seem to be regulatory powers of municipalities seem to be getting carved and whittled down and down. So I don't know the strength of ETJs and where that's going to be in the future. But needless to say, it's important to know if your property's in an ETJ, regardless if it's rural land or if it's a residence, because cities still have control to an extent.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. It makes sense. And the last question that I'm going to ask you is, how do you protect me? That's kind of that was the last thing you mentioned, and saving you money, making you money, and protecting you. And we've touched on several aspects of that, but maybe give us a summary of what a good real estate attorney such as yourself can do for a client to protect them.
Sure. Protecting you is, that's what any great partner, legal advocate should do for you. So my job is to tell you is to educate you in your options. Okay. A lot of people don't really realize what their options are, or they might think they know what their options are, but they're missing a couple important ones. Well, because of the perspective we talked about earlier,
right,
we can see a pretty good amount of all the possibilities and options for a particular deal. And I want my clients to be able to see those as well.
And that works buying or selling, right?
Absolutely. No matter what
Buying,
side.
you may be thinking you want to buy it to do this, but you may be able to look at it, Eric, and then come back to it and say, you also have the ability to do this or this in addition.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I also want to say, like, I don't like being in a position of telling you which option to pick. I will give you your options. I'll give you the pros and cons, but ultimately I want you to make the decision because it's up to you. And I want to empower you and make you feel good about the decision you make. So that is one of my primary drivers is to show you your options and then to set up, once we realize what your options are, to create the legal framework to implement that choice and to make sure that's airtight. And we have a pretty good track record with doing that. I've been doing this for a while, and knock on wood, have not had one of my contracts really challenged in court yet. But that's probably inevitability if you do it long enough. But so far, batting 1,000, and so that's really your goals. What are your options? Let's manifest that, create the structure for it, and help you to feel great about it, and allow you to have peace of mind at the end of the day.
And that peace of mind, you touched on this a little bit earlier as well, which is some of that is a level of due diligence, right, in terms of protection. Mm-hmm. Protecting me as the buyer from looking at things that I probably don't know that I should look for.
Yeah. And
even if I knew what to look for, I wouldn't have any idea where to look for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Here's a really great example. And and this is going to hit almost everybody because I'm going to talk about a single family home. When you're buying a single family home, the title is going to be conveyed to you, or you're going to convey title by a deed, right? That deed is either going to be a general warranty deed or it's going to be a special warranty deed. In very rare cases, it's going to be a deed without warranty. Some people might try to give you a quit claim deed. Do you know what the difference is between those?
I have no idea.
Yeah, see, neither do most people. But for some reason, everybody's signing a contract with that deed and that type typed out, plain as day, plain as the light of God's truth, not knowing what they're committing to.
Okay, but I'm trusting the title company to do that for me.
The title company doesn't represent you. They're trying to close the deal, and they're just going by what the contract says.
Okay, wait, so that's a really important point. Let's go through that again. The title company has no obligation to me, the buyer?
The title company has it. So the buyer... keep in mind this, in most transactions, the buyer's not the one who's paying for the title policy.
True. Seller usually pays.
If anything, it's the title company's incumbent to respond to the seller. So, or whoever's paying for title. So that's flag number one. But just by the nature of title companies are supposed to be Switzerland. They're not to give legal advice. Their whole job is to sell you an insurance policy or to provide for an insurance policy on the title of your property and to possibly help facilitate the closing, which I mean, bring the people together, exchange the funds, hand over the deed, and
give
file
everybody a pen.
Yeah, every pen. They're not there to give legal advice. They're not there necessarily to explain the nuances of your contract. So it's it's really important to understand what I mean. That's one really small example.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. It's interesting. I've bought and sold a lot of homes. Never thought to even look at that or question anything. So I imagine we could do a whole podcast on what to look out for and flags to be aware of when buying and selling a residential home. But we'll focus on the rural land for now.
Yeah.
So how about some closing thoughts for us, Eric, as we wrap up the value of a real estate attorney when you're looking at buying or selling rural land in particular?
Absolutely. A lot of, I understand from clients, you may be a little bit hesitant to hire a real estate legal counsel. It costs too much. Why would I need to do that? I've got an agent or whatever. I've sold a house before. Here's one consideration. The most sophisticated people who do land deals day in and day out always hire a real estate attorney. And these are folks who know the deal. And they trust us to bring us into a transaction. Why do you think that is? Another example, another thing to consider is that, yeah, you might spend some money on a real estate attorney, but how much is your peace of mind worth? That the deal that you just executed, that there isn't going to be anything coming back to you down the road, or that the dream house that you decided to put your life savings into is going to turn out and remain your dream house. So,
all right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it has definitely changed my perspective on using a real estate attorney. So I guess we'll call it a wrap for today. Eric, thank you for joining us and giving us a little bit more insight into what a real estate attorney is and how much value they can bring to you, whether you're buying or selling real estate, residential or particularly rural land. So thanks, Eric. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. And until next time, keep being an advocate for Texas land, and thanks for listening.